The Pacific sky looked harmless that morning, pale blue, glassy calm, the kind of day you'd never expect to die in. February 16th, 1944. Over the waters of Truk Lagoon, 700 miles southeast of Guam, Ensign Raymond "Red" Beasley, 23 years old, sits inside his F6F Hellcat. His squadron, VF6, has just finished strafing a Japanese airfield. It was supposed to be routine: hit the runways, get home. But routine doesn't exist out here. As he banks west to rejoin formation, his radio crackles. Half words, static, panic. 2 o'clock high, 6 bandits. Break left! He turns and there they are. 6 A6M Zeros, sunlight flashing off their wings like blades. They're fast, high, and perfectly aligned for the kill. Red's first burst lights the sky, tracers arcing up, but after a few seconds the guns jam. He taps the trigger again. Nothing. Dead silence. Then the sound every pilot dreads, the thud of hits slamming through aluminum skin. Rounds punch through his right wing. His cockpit fills with the smell of burning paint and oil. He's alone, low on ammo, engine wounded. 6 Zeros above him. The sea below is a mirror, waiting to swallow him whole. And in that impossible corner of sky, in those next 6 minutes, he does something no manual, no commander, no sane man would ever try. He turns off his guns. What happens next will change the way American pilots think about survival itself. For months before that morning, the Pacific had been eating men alive. Hellcats, Wildcats, Corsairs, they were faster, heavier, better armed than the Japanese Zeros. But numbers on paper don't matter when doctrine kills you before the enemy does. The Navy taught its pilots to fight in pairs. Never break formation, cover your wingmen, keep shooting. The logic was sound in the classroom, but in real air combat, it was suicide. Here's why. The 50 cal Browning guns mounted on American fighters overheated fast. Each Hellcat carried 6 of them, 400 rounds each. Sounds like a lot, but in combat, that's less than 20 seconds of fire. If you held the trigger too long, the barrels warped, they jammed, and when they jammed, you were just a flying coffin with a propeller. Pilots tried to control bursts, but in the chaos, when you see tracers closing in on your canopy, instinct wins. They sprayed, they burned through ammo, they cooked their guns. The numbers were brutal. In the Marshall Islands campaign, Navy records show 1 out of every 4 pilots was lost in the first 3 minutes of contact. Not from bad aim, from broken guns, overheated engines, or running dry. You can still read the after-action notes. Fired 1,200 rounds, 2 confirmed hits. Aircraft flamed out, ditched at sea. Gun jammed after 8 seconds. Pilot bailed, no shoot sighted. Names reduced to statistics, but some of those names had faces. Lieutenant Howard "Skip" Denson, shot down 2 days before Beasley's mission. Radio caught his last words. Out of ammo, trying to ram him. Then a scream, static, silence. Ensign Bill Morrow, Beasley's bunkmate, a quiet kid from Ohio who kept a lucky rabbit's foot tied to his throttle. His Hellcat was found half submerged, canopy open. He'd managed to ditch, but the current took him before rescue could arrive. His locker stayed sealed for weeks after. No one wanted to touch it. That's what it was like out here. A blur of faces at breakfast, gone by dinner. And for every medal pinned in Washington, there were a dozen men whose only reward was to vanish nameless into the sea. Beasley watched it happen again and again. And in every story there was a pattern. The ones who died followed the rules. They stayed in formation, kept firing, played brave until the math killed them. No one wanted to say it out loud, but the truth sat heavy in the ready room. Doctrine wasn't saving lives anymore. It was making martyrs. That's where the anger begins to turn into something else. Red Beasley wasn't the loudest man in his squadron. He didn't drink much, didn't tell war stories, didn't swagger on deck like the others. They called him Bookworm, not out of affection. He was the kind who watched. He'd sit on the wing of his Hellcat after missions, notebook on his knee, replaying every fight from memory. He sketched enemy maneuvers, gun patterns, the moments men disappeared. He noticed things most didn't, like how Zeros always lunged toward tracer fire, how the Japanese pilots would fixate on glowing rounds like moths to flame. And he started to wonder, what if the best way to win wasn't to shoot at all? In the world he lived in, that kind of thought was heresy. Pilots were trained to kill, not think. But Red wasn't chasing glory, he just wanted to come home. That's what drove him. Not medals, not headlines. Loyalty. A bone-deep refusal to end up another empty bunk, another set of folded wings. And so, one quiet night aboard the USS Intrepid, Red made a decision that could have ended his career before the enemy ever got the chance. He'd break the rules, and he'd do it alone. It started as an idea that sounded insane even to him. If tracer fire gives away your position, what if you never fire? What if you made the enemy think you were broken, out of ammo, defenseless, but used that to lure them into their own mistake? It wasn't about bravery. It was about desperation disguised as courage. So he took out his tools, pulled open the side panel of his Hellcat, where the gun fuses sat in neat little rows, and one by one, under the hum of the carrier's deck lights, he pulled them out. No witnesses, no paperwork. He'd just turned a fighter plane into a decoy. If anyone found out, he'd be grounded, possibly court-martialed for tampering with mission-critical weapons. But that didn't matter, because to him the math was simple. Following orders equals certain death. Breaking them equals maybe a chance. And thanks where the story turns. Not with glory, but with grit. He climbs into that cockpit at dawn, heart pounding, hands slick with oil and sweat, the smell of fuel thick in the air, the deck crew waving him forward. He doesn't tell his wingman, doesn't tell his CO. He just rolls forward, throttle open, prop biting into the humid air, carrying a secret no one else knows. Today, he'll go into combat without a single working gun, and somehow come out alive. The air over Truck Lagoon was chaos, a wall of gunfire and smoke, Zeros darting through clouds like silver needles, Hellcats diving in tight spirals, every pilot shouting something that no one could really hear. Beasley's radio hisses with half a dozen voices, overlapping panic. I'm hit! I'm hit! Jesus, there's too many! Get out! Get out! He keeps climbing, searching for his section leader. Nothing but static. Then he spots them, 6 Zeros in a shallow climb, perfectly spaced, sunlight flashing on polished aluminum. Hunting. Beasley knows the pattern. One hooks high, one slides under, the rest form a trap. The trick was always to keep your energy higher, but with a leaking fuel line and dead guns, he doesn't have the luxury. He's not thinking about medals or tactics now, just survival. Red's mind runs through everything he's observed over months of flying and watching men die. Zeros have agility, but not endurance. Their engines choke in dives, their wings tear under high Gs. They win by fear, by making the enemy panic. So what if he flips that psychology? Make them afraid. Make them think something impossible is happening. The idea sounds insane even inside his own head, but when you're staring death in the face, insanity can start to look like strategy. He cuts the throttle. The Hellcat drops like a rock, the G-force pushing him against his harness. The sudden dive throws off the Zero's aim. Tracer fire slices past his canopy, missing by inches. Then he banks hard right, throws the plane into a rolling turn, wings screaming under stress. From above it must look like a pilot spinning out, a crippled bird about to die. The Japanese formation breaks apart. Two move in for the kill. He can almost feel their confidence, their certainty that this is over. But Beasley isn't done. He slams the throttle forward again using gravity to build speed, 450 miles per hour, about 720 kilometers per hour. At that velocity, the Hellcat becomes a battering ram. He jerks the stick left, then right, just enough to make the enemy misjudge his trajectory. One Zero overshoots, the other pulls too hard and stalls. He hears the whine of the enemy's engine choking out, sees a flash of smoke. And then, something no one could have planned. The stalled Zero clips its wingman. Both spiral down, trails of gray smoke twisting into the sea. 4 left. Beasley's breathing hard now, oxygen mask fogging, sweat dripping down his neck. He's flying blind through instinct, through that animal sense that tells you where danger is before your brain can name it. He keeps dodging, pitching, rolling, but never firing. To the Zeros, it looks like madness, a plane that fights like a ghost, refusing to die, refusing to play by the rules of physics. The radio's silent now. Everyone else in his section is gone. All that's left is the ocean, the sun, and this one man who shouldn't still be here. He pulls up sharply, engine coughing, wings trembling, and the last 4 Zeros hesitate. They circle wide, confused. A crippled Hellcat shouldn't be able to climb like that. They can't see the broken gun circuits, the missing fuses. All they see is a pilot who should have been dead 5 minutes ago, and isn't. And in war, confusion is fear. 1 Zero dives too early, loses altitude. Another follows out of formation, panic spreading like static across the sky. Beasley cuts left again, skimming so low that his prop nearly kisses the waves. The sea spray streaks across his canopy. When he looks back, the sky is empty. They're gone. 6 Zeros. Fled from a man who never fired a shot. For a moment, silence, just wind and engine hum. He stares ahead, breathing shallow, barely believing it himself. He doesn't cheer, doesn't whoop. He just mutters, half in shock. Holy hell. It worked. When he lands back on the carrier, the deck crew runs out, cheering at the sight of bullet holes stitched across his fuselage. They think he fought his way out, that his guns overheated mid-fight. He doesn't correct them. He climbs down, legs shaking, hands trembling. Oil streaks down his cheek like blood. He just says, "She took a beating, but she got me home." Then he walks below deck, heart still pounding, and sits alone in the ready room. What he's done can't be reported. No officer would believe it, and if they did, they'd write him up for disabling weapons before a mission. But that night, while others celebrate, he opens his small black notebook and writes 6 words. No guns. 6 Zeros fled. Alive today. Then he underlines it twice. A week later, VF6 flies another mission. Different target, same chaos. This time, a pilot named Pete Hawk Dawson comes back, shaking his head. "Swear to God," he tells the others, "I stopped firing and cut throttle. They overshot right past me." Beasley doesn't say a word. He just listens. Word spreads fast. a rumor about a Hellcat feint that made the enemy break formation. No one knows who started it or how, but pilots start experimenting, throttling back mid-dogfight, rolling under, even cutting power to fake a stall. It works. The tactic gets a name, the Beasley spin. Unofficial, uncredited, but whispered in briefings from Guam to Saipan. By April, kill ratios start to shift. Where once a Hellcat section lost one plane for every 0 downed, now it's 3-1 the other way. Pilots are surviving, coming home, and somewhere in those numbers, hidden between mission logs and after-action reports, is the shadow of one pilot who dared to fly without guns. But Beasley's still just an ensign. No medals, no headlines. His commanding officer knows something's off. The Hellcat came back too shot up, too quiet. But he says nothing. Because in war, results matter more than regulations. And this kid brought his plane home. In the logbook, the mission's marked as enemy disengaged, no kills, pilot returned. But history isn't written only in reports. Sometimes it's written in the few who refuse to die the normal way. Beasley goes to bed that night listening to the sound of waves against steel, the engines humming below deck, the smell of oil and salt thick in the air. He doesn't feel like a hero. He just feels tired, but alive. And that, in this war, was enough. By spring of 1944, something strange began happening across the Pacific. Japanese pilots, once feared for their precision and discipline, were making mistakes. They'd break formation mid-fight, fire too early, or pull out of dives before getting a clean shot. To the Americans, it looked like panic. At first, no one understood why. But then, quiet patterns began to emerge. Squadrons flying out of the Intrepid, Essex, and Yorktown started reporting similar stories. Enemy planes overshooting, Zeros abandoning chases, pilots coming home with empty skies behind them, and no bullet holes in their wings. The only common factor? A new evasive style that wasn't in any manual. Fast dives, sudden throttle cuts, random roll patterns that looked suicidal, until you realized they worked. In briefing rooms, instructors began sketching the pattern on chalkboards. When you're low and outnumbered, roll under. Don't pull away. Make them think you're out. Then let gravity do the rest. Nobody said the name Beasley, but everyone was flying his ghost. Enemy intelligence picked up on it too. Japanese reports from late March called it the crazy cat maneuver. One pilot described it like this: the enemy aircraft fell into the sea, then suddenly climbed like a demon. Impossible control. Our men thought it was a trap from heaven. What Beasley had done, by accident, by desperation, had become a psychological weapon. The Zero's greatest strength was confidence. Now that confidence was cracking. Pilots started second-guessing what they saw. Was that Hellcat stalling or baiting? Was he out of ammo or waiting? The hesitation cost them seconds, and seconds in air combat are fatal. By the summer of '44, U.S. Navy kill ratios had flipped completely. In the early campaigns, Zeros shot down 2 Americans for every loss. By June, Hellcats were taking out 10 Zeros for every 1 they lost. 10-1. The historians later called it tactical evolution. But among the men who lived it, the talk was simpler. We stopped fighting like we were supposed to. We started fighting like we wanted to live. And that's the quiet miracle of it. A rule broken in one cockpit echoed through 1,000 others. But there was no ceremony for it. No medal, no commendation, no line in the history books. Red Beasley finished his tour, logged 312 combat hours, and went home to Texas in early 1945. He got off the train in a wrinkled uniform, duffel bag slung over one shoulder. Nobody at the station knew who he was. They never would. He married a girl from his hometown, opened a crop dusting business with another pilot who'd survived the war. He spent the next 40 years flying over cotton fields instead of coral reefs. Same sky, quieter ghosts. If you'd asked him about Truck Lagoon, he probably would have shrugged. Just another day. Got lucky, I guess. He never told his kids that the reason he came home was because he'd gone up once without working guns, and that for a few terrifying minutes, the enemy ran from a man who couldn't shoot back. The records still say no kills. The Navy still calls that engagement unconfirmed. But in the stories told in hangars and bar rooms where pilots speak with that mix of laughter and pain, his legend breathes. One of Beasley's old wingmates years later put it best. That kid didn't just live. He taught the rest of us how to stop dying. That's the kind of courage that never fits in a report. It lives only in memory, passed from one survivor to another until the paper fades and the voices stop. And maybe that's why we tell these stories now. Because every war writes its own mythology of power, guns, bombs, steel. But it's the quiet, invisible acts of human instinct that actually shift history's weight. The sky over Truck Lagoon looks peaceful today, blue again, just like that morning in 1944. The wrecks of Zeros and Hellcats rest beneath the coral, covered in sand and silence. Divers say the water there feels unnaturally still, as if the ocean itself remembers. And maybe it does. Because somewhere under that surface lies a single truth. The most dangerous pilot in the Pacific wasn't the one with the best aim. It was the one who refused to die by the rules. If this story hit you the way it hit us, tap like so more people hear it. Tell us where you're watching from in the comments. Our audience runs from small-town mechanics to history teachers. And make sure you're subscribed so these names don't disappear.